and I'm the Executive Director of the North American Association for Environmental Education. And we're so happy that you could be with us today. I think you're really going to enjoy the discussion. This is part of our 50th anniversary celebration webinars. And so we're happy you could be with us today. And as I'm doing the introductory comments in the chat, let us know of any work you're doing at the intersection of environmental education and civic engagement. We'd love to hear what you're doing, and we will be saving the chat, and you'll get a copy of it because a lot of good stuff ends up in the chat as we go through this. Today's webinar is all about kind of the intersection of civic engagement and environmental education, and it's titled Communities Grow Greener When Young People Have a Voice, Building Alliances for Place-Based Learning and Civic Action. And we have 4 incredible speakers today, 3 in person and 1 on video, and I'll introduce all 4 of them in a minute. You'll get a chance to meet them. And just wanted to start out, as many of you know, NAAE's mission is to advance environmental literacy and civic engagement. And we think that the power of education can really help people become more civically engaged, whether they're young, old, whatever in society. And it's all about creating a more equitable and sustainable future for all. And we know that civic engagement is the end goal of environmental education, and not the end goal, a big part of environmental education. And civic engagement encompasses so many different things about how we can all think about individually and collectively having an impact on building healthier and more resilient communities. And we know that when young people, young children, when teens get involved, it can really last a lifetime. And we're going to hear about that today from our panelists. And as many of you also know, NAAE has done a lot of work to try and bring the environmental education community together with the civic education community, because we can all learn from each other. We have a lot of overlapping interests. And by working more closely together, we can both do a better job of what we're trying to do. So 5 of you will win a copy of our presenter's book and the community engagement guidelines. And we will randomly pick 5 winners who answer the next question correctly in the chat. And do not pay attention to what anyone else says, because they don't know any more than you do. Right? And do not look this up. We're not going to give you a chance to do that. Okay. And so here's the question. Answer it in the chat, and we will randomly, after the webinar, pick winners, and you'll get a copy of both of these. Okay, so here we go. Whoops. And it's about the 17-year cicada invasion in the mid-Atlantic. We had a bunch of questions about cicadas, but here's your question. Is a cicada a type of locust, a bug, or a grasshopper? Okay, put it in the chat. Whoops, 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 whoops. I hit the wrong. Oh my gosh. Let's see, we have some locusts and we have some bugs, and we have a locust and a bug. Hey, that's pretty interesting. Okay, well, the answer is, if you didn't see it because you were like thinking about this, cicadas are true bugs. They're in the order Hemiptera. So we will take a random selection and you'll get a prize. So if you have not been on one of the NAAE webinars, we are bringing new ideas and insights to the field of environmental education. And we try to bring new speakers, new ideas, new thinking, innovation. And we also want to hear from you about what you'd like to hear, or if you know speakers or you know topics that you'd really like to hear about. So please let us know. You can write to me or Anne, and we would love to hear what you're thinking. We also want to thank the Forest Service for all their support. And we've been doing a series of webinars in conjunction with our friends at the Forest Service called eeINSPIRE. It's professional development for not only Forest Service staff, for anybody in the field and outside the field that want to be part of this learning network. So thank you to the Forest Service, and I want to introduce our amazing partner, Rachel Beyer, who will say a few words.
Oh, just thanks everybody for being here today. Just so excited and pleased that the Forest Service can help support this webinar series, and just really looking forward to all the learnings today. So if you don't already partner with the Forest Service, encourage you to do so. Please feel free to reach out to me or anybody within your region to find out how to do so. And thank you all for your time and being here.
Thanks, Rachel, and thanks for all you do, and thanks to the Forest Service. We also want to thank all our affiliate co-hosts. We have affiliates in 54 states, regions, and provinces that are doing great environmental education work and civic engagement work, and I encourage you to check them out as well. And also a big thanks to EPA and EE360 for their support of our webinar series. So thanks to all of them, and a big thanks to Anne Umali, who is the director of our professional development work at NAAE and the manager of E360, and so fantastic. So thank you, Anne, for all you do. And we know you've been on quite a few Zoom calls in the last 14 months. It's probably beyond the numbers that we can actually handle, but we're going to do another one today. I know you all know how to use Zoom probably, but some of you use Teams and other things. Please remember that you can talk to us through the chat, and you can send a note to all panelists or to everyone. So take your choice and keep us engaged as our ask questions throughout the webinar. And again, we'll be recording this. You'll get a copy of the recording and a PDF of the PowerPoint. And then this is an hour-long session, but our presenters have agreed to stay after class if there are additional questions that we didn't get to. So remember, put your ideas, resources into the chat. And thanks to Joe, we have live captioning today for anyone who needs help with the audio. Okay, so now the best part is introducing our speakers. So I'm going to introduce them all at once very quickly here, and I encourage you to look at their full bios on the web. It is an incredible lineup here, and I'm really excited. So first up, we have Luis Chawla, who many of you know, the amazing professor emerita in the environmental design program at the University of Colorado Boulder, and an active member of the university's Community Engagement, Design, and Research Center. She serves on the Scientific Advisory Committee of the Children in Nature Network, and her research and publications focus on children in nature, children in cities, and the development of committed action for the environment. So welcome, Luis. And secondly, we have Mara, who is a co-founder and the executive director of Growing Up Boulder, and we have a number of Growing Up Boulder fans out there. This is a program that involves young people in city planning and design. She will tell you more during her presentation. She presents and writes internationally on child-friendly cities and how to engage young people in community planning, including in her TED Talk, How Kids Can Help Design Cities, which has been viewed more than 2.3 million times. That's million. Amazing. And then we have Tori Dare, who is the Associate Professor of Environmental Studies at California State University, Monterey Bay, where her teaching and research focus on the intersection between sustainable communities, place-based environmental education, and social justice, particularly in underrepresented communities. So welcome, Tori. And then we will also be joined by Kiana Ledzima, who currently works as an educator for Nature Bridges Coastal Camp in California before she moves to San Francisco State University in the fall to earn a master's degree in equity and social justice in education. And working together and independently, when Tori and Mara and Luis combine their publications, they have 4 books and many book chapters and articles on young people's place experience, engagement with nature, and participation in creating child-friendly cities, including high-quality nature spaces. So the team has also put a resource list together, and that'll be shared with you after the webinar. So I will, oh, and I forgot to change this. You get a chance to see all of them. Here we go. And now I'm turning it over to you, Luis.
Okay, good. So yeah, Tori, you'll start our slides. Thank you, Judy. Thank you for this opportunity, all of you who are here. Next slide, Tori. Okay, so I'm just going to start with a basic framework. And first of all, what are we talking about when we talk about civic engagement for young people who are too young to vote? Even when they can't vote, there are still many ways that young people can participate in civic life in their communities. Next. Now, I'm going to go through some quickly. I'm not going to take time to talk about the photos that are illustrating each of these points, but they're each labeled there. Just considering social and environmental responsibility and the good of the larger community in making decisions is an aspect of civic engagement. Next. Investigating how community spaces and local environments function and doing problem solving around issues. Voicing ideas to decision makers in the community through speaking, writing, or the arts. And I want to underscore the arts there. I mean, certainly formal venues like presenting to city council matter a lot. Writing letters to a newspaper or to legislators. But don't forget the arts are a great medium for communication as well. Next. Educating others so they can make choices that benefit their communities and the environment. And this is a part of a signs that fourth graders created on why it's important to stay on trails when you're on the city's open space. And Mara will tell you more about that. Next. Offering community service like a stream cleanup here. Next. And raising funds for environmental causes. We're going to talk about all of those except raising funds. And as you've seen already from the pictures, while all of these forms of civic engagement can be done individually, they are also can all be done in groups. So participating in groups together in different civic activities like tree planting here on county lands. Next. So Mara and Tori and I worked together in creating a book that builds on our experience in doing civic environmental education called Placemaking with Children and Youth, Participatory Practices for Planning Sustainable Communities. And this webinar builds on that resource. It offers nearly 100 different participatory activities with young people. For example, if you want to involve young people in photo voice to document and evaluate a local place, it leads you how to do that step by step. If you want to do a bio blitz to find out what is living on your school ground, it suggests where you can find good resource people and describes how to plan the day. If your students want to address their city council, it suggests how you can prepare them to ace their presentation. If they want to make a video about climate change, it helps you provide basic instructions. It illustrates methods with examples from around the world and more than 200 photos, figures, and drawings, and it sends you on to many other resources. And many of its examples feature working with underserved communities, which is a commitment that Tori, Mara, and I all share. Next. And I want to remind you that there's another excellent resource, Community Engagement Guidelines for Excellence, which is available as a print presentation, publication, or a free download on the NAAEE website. It's filled with tried and true wisdom about how to create, manage, and evaluate partnerships to improve community environments. So we'll cover as much as we can in this webinar, but you have these resources available for you to dive in deeper, and also the other resources on the resource list that you'll get with this webinar. Next. So what are key steps in involving young people in local investigations and action to improve their community environments? The foundation is building relationships with community partners. So we're going to talk about that quite a bit. And this is essential. Take time. Don't rush through this. Take time to build trusting environments where everybody's going to gain from working together. Then Once you have your team, identifying projects that serve all partners. Next. And then you're ready to move on to identify and implement participatory practices to engage young people in investigating and evaluating local places, local environmental issues, or larger issues, sharing, but everything is interconnected now in our global world, sharing what they discover, developing ideas for action, and then taking action and evaluating outcomes. We're going to cover all of these steps except evaluation today, which deserves a webinar of its own. But we have a chapter on that in our book, and the NAAEE community engagement guidelines have very useful evaluation resources as well. Next. So last, why is it important to invest in building partnerships to enable young people to experience civic engagement? Next. Well, first, it is difficult for teachers to do civic projects alone. They need allies. And at the same time, environmental agencies and organizations want to connect with young people. So schools and out-of-school programs are places to find them. Next. When environmental organizations and local governments form partnerships with schools and out-of-school programs, they can better serve the diversity of their communities in age, in ethnicity, and in all the ways that population in a community varies. Next. Local, regional, and global environmental problems can't be solved by individual action alone. Young people need opportunities to gain skills in collective action. The United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child includes civic rights. And these are the civic articles in the convention, which actually were introduced by the United States. Paradoxically, the United States is the only member of the United Nations which hasn't signed the ratified the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. But that doesn't stop cities and schools from still putting its principles into action. And young people learn how environmental decisions are made, how to work in intergenerational groups, and that their ideas can matter and make a difference. So with this framework, I'm happy to turn the next part of this webinar over to my colleague, Myra Mincer, the Executive Director of Growing Up Boulder, who will share the 12-year process of partnership building and joint learning that has been evolving in our city.
Great. Thank you so much, Louise, and Tori. Thank you for being on the slideshow there. So I'm going to build upon what Louise talked about and really on the work of NAAEE. So Growing Up Boulder is Boulder's child and youth-friendly city initiative. And our vision is to inspire communities around the US and the world to adopt a child-friendly lens while also planning and developing communities for all ages. And our mission is to empower young people with opportunities for inclusion, influence, and deliberation on local issues that affect their lives. And we are a partnership. Growing Up Boulder is based out of the Colorado Nonprofit Development Center, so we are nonprofit, but we partner closely with the University of Colorado, the Cedar Center, which is where we have been up until recently, with the local school district, and with our city, the City of Boulder. We were founded in 2009 by myself and by Louise and Willem van Vliet, another professor and then Director of Planning, David Driscoll. And we serve kids as young as 0 all the way up through 18. And the kids are then mentored by our university students who work with us. We have engaged more than 6,500 children and youth on 100 projects locally. And this is really important. 50% or more of the young people with whom we work are from historically marginalized groups, whether that's BIPOC, LGBTQ, kids who have been unhoused, kids who are learning English as another language. We have lots and lots of different forms of diversity in Boulder, and we make an extra effort to hear from those young people. Now we've reached more than 2.5 million people globally between the talks that all of us involved with Growing Up Older have given and the writing that we've done. And then we added in here so that you know this other resource, we designed the country's first child-friendly city map with kids and for kids, with more than 700 children and families in Boulder. So as Louise mentioned, growing up, well, she mentioned about the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. Growing Up Older is actually based on the principles outlined here. And next slide, please. There are cities all over the world that take these principles and operationalize them. And here you can see just a few examples of some of the countries that have really taken these principles and made them their own. I love the handprint because it talks about what are the basic rights that we're talking about here. And one of the ones Growing Up Older really focuses on is the right to be heard, as well as all the other ones. They're all intertwined, but you'll see that these are woven throughout the work that we do. So how do we do this work? You know, today we're talking about partnerships and how do we make those really effective? So I'm going to describe Growing Up Boulder's partnership structure with the knowledge that it started out very small. Before I even describe what it is now, we started out with no money, with me volunteering and also working with a graduate student who was funded through an existing program, with the time of professors and others in the community. We started out really small and built upon that for the past 12 years. So I think that's important to keep in mind, no matter where you are on your own journey, that there are all sorts of models that can be effective, and we'll talk about those. Now, specifically, as I mentioned, we have 4 partners working together, and we have a memorandum of understanding amongst the 4 of us. And that is renewed frequently, and it basically says we're committed to working together in partnership. We also have a steering committee, which is comprised of about 15 organizations at a given time, with 60 partners overall. And you know, organizations will come and go depending upon their needs at the time and the projects we're working on. But regardless of who's involved, they're very engaged, and we all come together to do networking and collaboration. And then we have an executive committee that has sort of transformed now more of a board structure for nonprofit that helps set direction, helps with fundraising. And again, just going back, you know, remember, this is a 12-year work in progress. So what I started thinking about is how would we map out different structures? And when you think about child and youth participatory planning initiatives, I realized there's really a level of different formality and a different number of partnerships these different groups have. Now, in the very top right-hand corner, you'll see UNICEF USA's child-friendly city initiatives. And UNICEF USA just started implementing these in 2020. So it's a fairly new program for them. It's very formal. It involves MOUs and involves a set list of indicators that cities choose from. It's a very formalized process with many, many partners for a given city. Growing Up Boulder is a little bit lower down in terms of formality. Yes, we have a memorandum of understanding, but we're quite flexible and always iterating in terms of how we work with our partners. I also have on here Professor Durr, Tori's program from California State University, Monterey Bay, which has fewer but well-established partnerships, as well as perhaps a somewhat less formal relationship, but it is formalized in its own way, where individual classes have ongoing relationships with the community and community organizations. And I want to say, not one of these is not better than the other. They're just different models for doing this work. We talk about this in our own book that we've written, and you'll see it in today's examples. So this is the Growing Up Boulder model in a nutshell. We start by establishing children as experts. So we capture their lived experience, and we know that whatever they have experienced so far is extremely valuable, and we don't actually want to influence it before we hear from them. But we present what the introduction is to the project we're working on, why their voice matters, and what's going to happen with the input they give. Then we increase the young people's competence by having them go out and do research on the topic. What do they want to know and need to know? We bring in experts from the outside to interact with the kids, and then our undergraduate interns research precedents, which we share with the young people. Next, our young people synthesize their ideas, so both their original ideas and their new ideas that they've learned, and share their recommendations on whatever the issue is. And what's exciting about this is we then bring city decision makers or other decision makers from the community into the classroom to hear directly from the young people and have an ongoing dialogue. And finally, we also create a final report, which is handed over to the decision makers that they can always refer back to. And those reports can be referred back to, 10, 15 years later. We've seen it happen before. So this is the overall process. So the project I want to give you as a case study today is called the Gun Barrel Hill Integrated Site Project. And the partners were ourselves, Growing Up Boulder, the City of Boulder's Open Space and Mountain Parks Department, which deals with trails and hiking and protecting wildlife and nature in our city, and then Heatherwood Elementary School's 4th grade classes. And so what's nice about this project is it happened just this past year, so it's very timely and relevant. So why did I choose this case? First, it builds upon both old and new partnerships. So we have established relationships at the administrative level in the district of the school, but we also need to make new partnerships with the teachers who are working with us. And so we used both of those to inform this work. Another thing is that 2 different organizations had the goal of having the children become eco-stewards. Both Open Space and Mountain Parks had that as a goal, but so did the 4th grade teachers. And so it was really well aligned. Next, we employed place-based learning. Now this worked perfectly for this project because, as you'll see, the place they were studying was literally across the street from the school. But when you hear from the kids too, it really enhanced their learning. It also is a project that is elevating children's voices and is leading to direct civic action, which I'll get into today. And finally, I think it's a great case study because it happened all during the pandemic. And it shows how we were able to adapt things to a situation where we had extra layers of care that needed to be taken. Next slide, please. Thank you. Okay, so what was this all about? Well, it was a 3-part year-long inquiry. The first part, for which Growing Up Boulder was most involved, is the Wood Brothers land. And we worked with Open Space and Mountain Parks to ask the kids 2 main questions. First, this is your backyard because Wood Brothers is across the street. How do you want to discover nature in this area? And then the larger scale question is, what kind of learning and outdoor classroom experiences would you like to have? They want this to not inform just that space across the street, but spaces all over our city and community. Now, the other 2 parts happened without Growing Up Boulder's involvement as much, but they built upon our model. So Open Space staff had learned our model, as had the teachers, and they were able to implement it the second half of the year. Gun Barrel Hill is a site you'll see 5 minutes away, and the kids were looking at trail signage for land restoration and really educating the community about what's important about this land. And then the school itself, from the teachers, was studying Indigenous peoples of Colorado. And so the teachers overseeing this integrated all of these pieces together in one seamless year-long study. Here is the location of all these places. You can see on the left-hand side is the elementary school, and then right across the street from them is the Wood Brothers property, a 24-acre property. And then a little bit north of them is the Gun Barrel Hill Student Art Project. And I'll touch upon all of these. Next one, please. Thank you. So again, if you end up looking at our book, many of the techniques you'll see here today are described in the book. So you can actually learn how to do them, go out and practice them. And you'll see them in these examples. Next, please. Okay. So this is the grand reveal. What did the kids have to say in answer to the question, What kinds of nature discovery experiences do you want to have on this Wood Brothers property? Well, first kids wanted wildlife viewing stations, like a treehouse observation tower to be able to look at all the red-tailed hawks that are out there and watch them swoop down onto the prairie dogs and other animals. Designated trails to protect and preserve, and interpretive signage. Kids wanted opportunities to explore, both structured and unstructured. And they wanted opportunities to play and build, because we all know that play is kids' work. Picnic tables, shelters, and benches were requested to make learning and visiting more comfortable. And finally, they wanted to make sure the sledding hill does not go away that has been there for many years. When they were asked what kind of outdoor learning or outdoor classroom experiences they wanted to have, kids asked for naturalist program like they experienced during this curriculum. They wanted to take their classroom outdoors, not just for science learning, but for all kinds of learning. They absolutely loved the outdoor experience. They asked for both a natural amphitheater and amenities for outdoor learning, again, to make learning outdoors comfortable, and then also the wildlife viewing stations. And so here's a video by one of the fourth graders. Now this is for the Gun Barrel Hill Project, educating people, and I'm gonna let you listen to her.
It is important to protect the prairie because the grasses provide oxygen. On our field trip to Gun Barrel Hill, I learned to respect the prairie and not to walk off the trail because there are lots of animals and plants living there. You might think, I don't see any animals. These grasses look dead here, so I can walk on the prairie. We are fourth graders from Heatherwood who are trying our best to protect the prairie and the wildlife. On our field trip, I learned that there are small animals on the ground that you might not be able to see. Gun Barrel Hill is only 5 minutes away from our school. I visit the hill a lot, so the prairie and the wildlife living around it really means a lot to me. It'd mean a lot if people could not walk off the trail. Thanks, and enjoy the trail.
Okay, so that's just one of many examples. And I think in the chat, I know Anna's going to put, oh, she put it in the chat already. You can actually see a website the kids designed all by themselves. It was all kid designed, and you'll see many more videos and artwork like that. Okay, next slide, please. So we have done some evaluation of this project, and I'm going to give you just a snippet of some of what our kids and partners had to say. So when we asked, what was your favorite part of working with open space and mountain parks and growing up Boulder and doing this work, kids said, going to the sites. It was easier to learn when you're actually there. Again, place-based education. They recognized how much it means. And then multiple kids said everything. They loved this work. Next, we said, well, how did it make you feel to give your input on this project? And kids said, I felt like I was saving the world. And this talks a bit to some of the work that Louise does that talks about how when kids actually have a chance to take action and make their voices heard, it actually can make them feel more optimistic and less depressed about the state of our world. Another young person said, I felt like people really listened to me and respected my opinion. It was cherished. Okay, next one. One of the fourth graders reflected, one of my greatest lessons that I learned was that you can learn outside of school and without using any electronics. All you need are your ears, eyes, and skin. And I know as a parent during the pandemic, this is music to my ears since there's been so much electronics. This meant a lot to me. Okay, next. One of our teachers said that the help that Growing Up Boulder gave, connecting us with resources, was beyond any program we had ever worked with. Staff was also helpful in connecting the project to our curriculum. And again, this goes back to what Louise was saying about we need to do this as a team. It's too much to be able to ask teachers on top of everything they're doing to do this work all on their own. And so we had a team approach to support them. Our OSMP partners, one of them said, your work is so influential to getting youth voices involved in city projects. I will forever be changed as a professional. I am excited to figure out how to make the students' ideas come to fruition on the ground. And that's really a testament to the commitment of our city staff of really taking this seriously and taking it to the next level. Okay. So how will the kids' input be used? Well, on the left, you can see that the signs created by the Kids Art are actually going to be used at the site location. So OSMP is in the process of choosing them and creating all of that. So over the next year or two, they'll actually have some of the kids' artwork up there. So it's making an impact at the individual and site-specific level. Also, the report that we've created, which you'll find on our website, is actually going to be used for future city planning, not just for this one project. And it's impacting our city at the systems level. And finally, whether or not the kids know it, their work on the website and video and everything is impacting us at the global level. It completely aligns with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So if you want to learn further about how to actually do some of this participatory planning or how to make a child-friendly city map, this is something that Growing Up Boulder offers as a service. You can find more information on our website. And I wanted to just thank you for listening and for hopefully being inspired by our young people. And I'm going to pass this over to Tori.
Thank you, Mara. So I'm going to talk a little bit about partnerships that I have been developing over the past 5 years while here as a professor at California State University in Monterey Bay. I don't think it made it into any of our introductions, but I worked with Louise and Mara very closely when I was at the University of Colorado and working with Growing Up Boulder. And so when I moved here about 5 years ago from Colorado, I had to figure out new ways to take the wonderful principles that Mara's been talking about from Growing Up Boulder and put them in a completely new context. And I will just say that that was very hard. Growing Up Boulder is a very inspirational model, and so if any of you are feeling this is great, but I don't know how to get started, I decided to share a couple of kind of emerging partnerships in the stages where we're at and the stages that we took to get started, because we all have to start somewhere. And I found myself in that position. So the first of these two projects that I'm going to share is started really with the Elkhorn Slough Foundation. And they reached out to the Hall District Elementary School, and it was only after some time that the university was also brought into this partnership. And so for some reason, when I'm advancing my own slides, it doesn't want to go forward. Hang on just a sec. Here we go. So Elkhorn Slough is an internationally important wetland. It's received that recognition for being home to more than 20,000 shorebirds seasonally, to providing nursery habitat for fish, including leopard sharks and bat rays, and is a very important home to our endangered sea otters, which is also the mascot of CSUMB. And so Elkhorn, it is also a place that's very significantly impacted by California's intensive food production, for which many of you may have eaten this week. And so the Elkhorn Slough Foundation has been in the process of doing outreach to communities and schools for many years, decades, to try to build awareness about the impacts of agricultural runoff and pollution into the slough, and to help build connections to the natural wonders that are really a part of this slough habitat. And you can see in the blue dot up at the top of the map is the Hall District Elementary School. It's at the very outer edges of this northeast portion of the slough lands on what's called Carneros Creek. So it feeds into the slough lands and is directly across the street from the Hall District Elementary School, where there is no nature play or nature on the school grounds, and many of the children have never had access to much nature in their home environments. And so the idea was to bring together these partners to explore this wonderland of a place that's just across the street. And in terms of doing this, there were a series of field trips that were planned on a monthly basis to bring more than 60 students in 4th grade to the field trips with only 3 teachers. So you can imagine the chaos that this felt, and they were looking for resources and support to help managed this with parents who are usually unable to attend the field trips to support this. And so they started just inviting CSUMB students, and 2 students worked kind of sequentially in their capstone projects as individuals to help set goals, help develop and support implementation of some of the lessons and activities on the site, and to develop evaluation materials. A big part of the framing of this work was that the 4th graders wanted to be thought of as junior rangers. That was a concept that made sense to them. They were familiar with rangers, and that was the role that they wanted to take on as stewards of the land. And in these field trips, they participate in actual site restoration, often through planting, sometimes by other work, cleanups, and then activities to just explore and connect with nature. And the culminating event is that the 4th graders lead a tour of 2nd graders on the last monthly field trip, and act as rangers and interpreting and helping the 2nd graders explore the site. As I mentioned, many of the children have had very little exposure to nature otherwise, as can be seen here in their drawing of a favorite memory of seeing the bees come out of a tree or seeing a snake for the first time. And so as this partnership progressed, I folded this into an environmental education class that was new to our university that I created and developed it, in part to support this partnership. And so we had 24 undergraduate students who could come on these monthly field trips. And where partnerships are strong, everyone benefits. So the teachers were thrilled to have bodies out there that could help facilitate lessons and people who were passionate about nature. And the students got fantastic experience about how to actually facilitate lessons in the field and learn about good principles and practices for place-based education through a range of activity types. And as the project has moved forward, we've discussed the possibility of how we can engage students and the community in conceptualizing an interpretive trail that would lead from the outdoor classroom where the field trips normally take place to a historic ranch property that's being restored and is used currently just for private gatherings or art exhibits, and how the community might play a significant role in some of the ways that Mara talked about with Growing Up Boulder to shape what this trail might look like. This was paused during the pandemic, but we are looking forward to moving forward with it as things open up. The second partnership I want to share is really a result of my own outreach looking for allies and teachers who want to engage in participatory practice and thinking about their communities and civic engagement in the school. And so I found a wonderful partner teacher at Los Arboles Middle School, which is a school here in Marina where I live and work, and is a Title I school where there's more than 14 languages spoken in the school, so highly diverse. We wanted to bring some of the principles from the book. She had read the book and was really excited about it, but had never done any of this work before. So we started with an elective class. We knew we wanted to fold it into a full class over time, but it takes sometimes more than a year to get those on university books. So meanwhile, I wrote a small grant from the university to fund 3 student assistants who could come and work with an elective class at the middle school to facilitate lessons. And so we used a lot of the methods that are described in the placemaking book, including photo voice, interviews with family members about how they interact with food and plants and nature, and then drawings, paintings, 3D models, and community events. And one of the students who was a part of this work is Kiani, who was introduced as one of our speakers today. And she's out in the field teaching kids as we speak. She's now an alumna of our program, and she's going to share more about this particular partnership through the video.
Hi, my name is Kiani Ledesma. I am one of the CSUMB alumni who was part of the Phase 1 and Phase 2 of the Building Communities project. And I'm just going to give some of my reflections of those two today. So for the Phase 1, which was the collaboration between Los Arboles Middle School and CSUMB, it was myself and 2 other CSUMB alumni students who went in and co-taught a class for about 3 months. We went in twice a week and gave different activities and lessons for students. And before we even started teaching, we all got together and just wrote down what we wanted our outcomes and our goals to be for that class and what we wanted the students to get out of it, as well as brainstormed ideas for activities and lessons that we could do to meet those goals. And after that, we went in and started co-teaching the classes. We did a lot of different activities. They kind of all built up and added to each other. And after we would teach the classes, we would meet up back at CSUMB and just discuss the different ways that maybe the activity went really well, what we heard students say and how they express themselves, and maybe that activity didn't go very well, and how we could change that for the week following and just try to add to it. And which was really great because I was able to use that for different experiences later on. But knowing that we had different activities that we could do with students was really cool, because then we weren't really working out of a book. We were working out of things that were changing every week that we could use to base off of what we wanted the students to get out of. So photo voice, we did that activity, which was also talked about in the placemaking book. And we also did a landscaping activity. So for photo voice, they kind of connected. So photo voice, they had students go out into their garden and their school and take pictures of things they liked and they didn't like, and then discuss why they liked them and why they didn't like them, and compare them to their classmates and see what they liked and they didn't like. And that kind of built into some of the other activities. So like interviews and amate bark painting and the landscaping lesson, which had students, we took them out to their garden and had them kind of draw out what their garden looked like. And then the next day we had students draw out what they wished their garden looked like. So maybe they wanted more plants, maybe they wanted a pond, maybe they wanted a pizza oven or a chicken coop into their garden. And it kind of just built up from the previous activities that we had done, and let them kind of really have this freedom as to what they wanted their garden to look like and what they wanted their school to look like. And they were just given this opportunity to draw the ideas and be as creative as they wanted to be. And at the end of that, we did a focus group. So we had the students walk around and point out ideas that were really common. So a lot of students wanted a rose garden, and also a lot of students wanted a chicken coop. So at the end, we had students kind of like vote for which ideas they wanted to actually be built and done in their garden. And a lot of students wanted a chicken coop, and a lot of students also wanted a rose garden. So we decided that students who were able to like express their passions for school and the things they liked, when they were able to put all their efforts into something they felt really passionate about. And so like the chicken coop, even though it wasn't something we were kind of like prepared for and really wanted to come of the class, but we thought, okay, this is what they really want, so let's just roll with it. And I know Julie has had students write like letters to the principal as to why they wanted a chicken coop, and then they built 3D models. And it's really awesome to see how this passionate students get when they can really focus on the things they like and what they want to get out of their class and their education as well. And just seeing how proud the students were to show off all their projects at the end of the quarter to their parents is amazing to see. And kind of just seeing how that classroom was made up of different diverse students from different backgrounds and ethnicities, and just speaking different languages was really great to see how at the end they all communicated. And I remember one of the activities for the Rose Garden group, we took them out to the garden and had them plant different plants. And I remember one of the students who was a Spanish speaker, she was learning English. And she looks over to one of the other students, and she's like, "Oh, tierra?" And she points to the soil. And so the other student goes, "Oh, soil, yeah." So she gives her soil, and it's just like seeing that they're communicating without having the same language, but they have this physical thing in front of them, and they're meeting that goal of, we're planting this garden that we wanted, and we're planting all these plants, and we don't necessarily have to speak the same language to be able to do that and just have that end goal met, which was really amazing to see.
I'm sorry, that got cut off just there for a second. But Kiani, I was also a participant in the next phase, and it's going to continue with a video after I finish, just a brief introduction to this next phase of the partnership. So after that first period where we were working with the 3 students going in, undergraduate students going into the class, we folded it into a capstone class at the university with 24 undergraduate students, and then a middle school environmental science course. And so in the framing this part of the partnership, Julie, the partner teacher, had gone to a workshop where she had read some of Julie Singleton's work with Head, Heart, Hands model for sustainability education, and she really liked that framing. So we had the undergraduate students read that article at the beginning of the semester, and their interpretation of that was that we need to teach with physical activities, we need to make connections to lived experiences of the students, we need to put students in charge of their own learning, where they can really shape how it is that they engage with the projects that we had for the, and this was largely focused on transformation of the same outdoor classroom that Kiani was describing in the landscape activities. And so in the first year, we identified a wide range of projects that were possible in that outdoor classroom. We gave some choice to both the university students and the middle school students as to which they wanted to engage with. And so we had a directional totem to try to help people orient where they are in the world. We had a native plant garden and interpretive signage. We had a weather station, ecosystem murals, and a vermicompost system, which was the project that Kiani was a part of. We also had a budget of $0. So a lot of what the students also had to do was think about where they're, how they were going to do this with no resources or money. This was an old outdoor classroom that was being revitalized, and so they used a lot of materials that already existed. So in the middle bottom photo, you can see the students pulling up a garden bed box, and they used that wood to build the vermicompost bin. Also, the signage for the totem and the interpretive sign and murals were all made from repurposed materials from the school or from community partners. And so part of civic engagement is starting out with these partnerships and then saying, who else do we need to bring in order to make this happen? And so sometimes that was experts that they brought in, and sometimes it was local community partners who were likely to support the project and may make donations or help with material rentals. So in the second year, the teacher, Julie Haas, had gotten a grant from NOAA, and it was an Ocean Guardian School grant. And so we decided to frame this year focused on the topic of ocean-friendly practices. And so we created, we had owl habitat creation, both through nesting boxes and changing some aspects of the landscape, to have chemical-free usage for rodent control in the garden. Some of the students had identified in the previous year they wanted a bench, and so we made a cob bench so that we wouldn't be introducing any chemicals and reducing our carbon footprint to benefit the ocean. And then the last group was involved in ocean interpretation, ocean-friendly practice interpretation. And so they decided to focus on storm drain mural as a way to communicate to the school the connections between runoff and debris and ocean health. And so they chalked that out. They made polls that they gave to students and staff, and they wrote a proposal to the district to fund this storm drain mural. In both years, we drew on principles and tools that are in the placemaking book. In the first year, we kind of were a little bit more informal, and then we provided more structure to a few of these methods in the second year. So in the first year, the middle school students took the university students on an informal tour of the school, showing them things they liked and didn't like. In the second year, we built on the student-led tours descriptions in the book, and built on that a little bit, in that the middle school students designed a tour of the school with very specific things that they wanted to show and lead the university students around. And then the university students returned the next class and had a slideshow of their photographs of the places, quotes from the students, and questions about the school. And one of the university students reflected that it was almost as if they had been waiting for someone to ask them about their school. And it's amazing how infrequently that actually occurs. So this was a great way to build rapport and set the framework for engaging with each other in transformation of the school. The other thing we did a little bit of both years, but again, more structured in the second year, was to develop collaborative agreements and planning. And this is a focus of chapter 3 of the book. And so in the second year, we actually had the students read that and use some of the principles that are explicitly described there to plan out and identify roles, responsibilities, and ways of interacting with each other. And this set a really important framework for everyone to work well together. And so in the survey reflections at the end of the semester, the middle school students reflected ideas that everyone could participate and make a contribution. And students said things like, I'm so proud of myself, I feel connected to my community, and this helped me learn how to use all types of techniques that will be helpful to me later in life. And so I'm going to share a little bit more of Kiani's reflections through another video, but I want to mention she talks about the diversity of the CSUMB students. And so just for a little bit of background, we are a Hispanic serving institution. About 45% of our student body is Latinx. And we are about 35% white, 15% other races. More than half our students are the first in their families to attend college, and about a third are from low-income families. So when Kiani talks about diversity, she's reflecting on that context.
For phase 2 of the Building Communities project, which was the 24 CSUMB students in the capstone class, we had split up into 4 different groups, and each group was in charge of a different project. And before we went into this classroom with the middle schoolers, we actually got together and talked about what we wanted our goals to be and what that final outcome of the project was going to look like. Then we went into the class and introduced ourselves, as well as got to know who the students were. And then the students got split up into those 4 groups. And each group had about 5 to 7 CSUMB students, as well as middle schoolers, which was a perfect ratio because it allowed us to really connect with each student, as opposed to if we had about 30 students to each group. The project I was part of was a vermin compost bin project. And for that one, when we started off, we kind of got together both as the CSUMB students and the middle schoolers. And we brought in worms for the students to get to play around with. And it kind of helped as an icebreaker and kind of get the students to lose that fear of touching worms and just getting their hands in the soil. So by the time building the bins came by, it was easy for us to just get the kids to participate because they were already trying to dig and just ripping out plants and weeds, and it could have been easy for us to just go in there and build the bins, but we wanted the students to see their work whenever they went into the garden, just have that reflected back. So we wanted them to be able to say, I painted that or I built that. And we also gave them the homework assignment, in from which whatever they wrote down, they picked words that they had written, and then those words were painted onto the final wooden signs. And they also got to paint what they wanted onto the actual compost bin. They also participating in hammering some of the chicken wire. And from that, I heard one of the students say that she knew how to hammer in nails and like staples because her dad worked in construction. So from that, you get to really see that connection to their life experiences into the project. A lot of the students also mentioned that they looked forward to coming to class because they got to be with their friends and just work outside and not be stuck inside a classroom, which was actually what a lot of the CSUMB students looked forward to going to class as well, because we weren't having to work at a textbook and be inside a classroom all day. We were getting to be with students and actually applying those methods that we had talked about in class. And it kind of helped build our own little communities within there. And one of the things that I think helped build those communities was the fact that our CSUMB class was very diverse and made up of different ethnicities and people that spoke different languages. And the middle school class was also made up of students that was really diverse. And they kind of made that connection with them a lot easier. For the end of the project, the students had like a final physical project that they could show their parents and their friends. So it's not like just a piece of paper of their homework, like, oh, I got 100% on this, but it was the actual thing that they built or they planted, and they could come back years later and say, I planted that tree, or I painted that totem pole, or helped put it up. So it was really cool to be able to have that lasting like impression for the students there. And for the future, I think for myself, I am definitely able to bring a lot of those methods that were used in both phase 1 and phase 2. And one of the things that I really use, so I was a naturalist a year ago, and one of the things that was really helpful for me was coming back after each lesson and really dissecting it and saying, this is what went really well, and this is something I could change, and being observant and aware how the students are reacting to each activity and how I can tweak each one to make sure that every student is getting as much as possible from it. And one of the activities that I say was a really good example of that, of like trying to have students connect to nature, but also being able to connect it back to their life once they go back home and try to do that activity back there, was an activity called Adopt a Tree. And for that activity, we would kind of open up with having students close their eyes and just think back to a tree in their life that they can remember and maybe have like a connection to. And it doesn't have to be a strong one. It can just be a tree that maybe is in their backyard, or a tree that's maybe they see that when they're walking to class, or they're driving by when they're going to class and they see the tree, or maybe it's at their school campus. And just trying to have them remember, what does it smell like? Does it have any fruits on it? And afterwards, they can then do that activity at home and try to connect it, because not every student is going to have a forest or a redwood tree in their backyard. So just having it accessible and just being there for them to be able to use it later on. And one of the last things that I think is super important when having students connect to nature and having that connection easier is also having educators and naturalists and just people that are in those teaching positions be diverse and kind of have themselves reflected in there, because it makes that connection a lot easier. And just having people that maybe speak your language or that look like you, it really does help students kind of feel at ease and know that they too belong in those outdoor spaces, or even the indoor spaces as well. And all of these methods that were talked about for phase 1 and phase 2 are things that I have been able to apply to my career and hope to continue to apply to whatever comes forward for me in the future. For phase
And so thank you. I will now pass it over to Louise to wrap up our presentation.
I have just a few minutes of final reflections that I'll go through quickly, and then we're open for the Q&A. And thank you, Mara, Tori, Kiani, for really putting life on the bones of civic engagement principles. So as we were planning this webinar, I reflected that the projects we're describing here are in many ways similar to place-based initiatives in environmental education in the 1980s. I thought, for example, of the issue investigation and action training curriculum that Harold Hungerford and his colleagues developed in the 1980s. It encouraged teachers to involve students in investigating local environmental issues and planning how they could take action. But students thought about how they could take action. They wrote down the steps that they could take, and actually taking action was optional, because the curriculum designers understood how difficult that is for individual teachers to do, just as we've been saying. So I was thinking about how our work is different now, how we're working in a new context. One piece is that the threats to the planet's life systems have been intensifying since the 1980s. So it's really all the more urgent to give young people an opportunity of what collective action means, how you do it, what it feels like. So what you've seen is we build action planning in from the very beginning, including the partnership building that's core from the start. And another new context change is the emphasis on social justice and inclusion. Now we work with a commitment to the principle that everyone has a right to high quality green spaces and inclusive public spaces, whoever they are, wherever they live, and whatever their age. And this is a new sphere of action for environmental education that NAAE has really been embracing. Next. Next. So the naturalist E.O. Wilson said that this is the bottleneck generation. Young people now are the bottleneck generation, born as the planetary conditions under which humans have evolved are changing, and with an uncertain future ahead of them. And they'll be responsible for carrying our society forward. And I've come to conclude that supporting them as they take on this challenge is one of the most important things we can do as adults. Next. I did a review last year of the research on connecting young people to nature and also helping them cope with environmental losses. And borrowed the term constructive hope from Maria Ojala, a Swedish researcher. It means hope that looks risks in the face, acknowledges them, and finds meaning in action. And in this way escapes denial, paralyzing despair, and apathy. And this is what we want to arm our young people with as they move ahead in their lives. Next. What the review also showed is there were these 4 key ingredients to fortifying young people with constructive hope. One is creating safe spaces where they can share their environmental emotions as well as their ideas for how to make the world better. Another is enabling young people to learn what they can do as individuals that can have positive impacts. But we can't stop at that individual level, because when young people know a problem is too big for them to solve by themselves and they're trying to do it all alone, they risk feeling futile, and research shows this. So we also need to show young people they are not alone, that other people share their concerns and they are taking action too, and enable young people to take collective action together. And all of the projects that we've shared today include all of these 4 ingredients because they are intrinsic to civic environmental education. And it's not just young people who benefit when we involve them in projects like this. I think what you've seen in the examples that we've shared is that they bring so much insight, energy, and creativity to this work, and we really can't do without them.
Thank you all so much. Louise, did you have more was that the end?
That was it.
That was wonderful. Great reflections. Thank you all so much. What a wonderful presentation. I hope you've been looking in the chat, because so many positive comments, and the importance of civic engagement and starting early, so important. So thank you all so much. Everybody will get a copy of everything. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Anne, and then we will take questions, because we do have 3 or 4 questions that were not answered yet. And we'll try and end by 4:15. So 4:18, something like that. Go ahead, Anne. Thank you so much.
Thank you all. This was so awesome. Loves hearing all of the stories and the videos. So wonderful. And I'm going to go through this really quick so we have some time for Q&A before we end at 4:15. Just want to let you all know that we will be sharing the webinar recording, the slides, the notes, and the giant resources list that our panelists put together. I'll be sending that out to all of your emails by tomorrow. And they'll also be on the EE Pro site, the same site you went to when you registered for today's webinar. If you enjoyed our webinar today, I invite you to check out our entire webinar series on EE Pro. You'll see recordings going back to 2017. So lots of great webinars and webinar recordings and resources all on EE Pro. And if you really like today's webinar, and if you're not a member already, I invite you to become a member of NAAEE. We've rolled out a whole bunch of new ways that you can have memberships, from individual memberships, professionals, and we also have some discounted member rates for students and retired individuals. And by becoming a member, you'll be joining a growing global network of dedicated individuals who are committed to supporting environmental education, just like this webinar series. Want to announce two upcoming conferences that we've got going on this summer. The first is our Nature-Based Early Learning Conference, July 26th and 30th. It's the largest gathering of nature-based early childhood education professionals that are all meeting online in July. More than 120 sessions will be live and on demand, and there's so many group discounts and pay what you can pricing. So we're really trying to get as many people to join the Natural Start Alliance Early Childhood Conference.
And Louise is part, oh, you just were gonna include that.
You read my mind, Judy. As a quick plug, Louise is going to be part of a researcher panel talking all about health and wellness and early childhood nature-based education. So you will see more of her in July. You just have to register. The other conference we have going on is our NAAEE 50th conference, happening October 7th and 8th and October 12th to the 15th. We have a wonderful lineup so far. We have invited EPA Administrator Michael Regan to join, and we also have a number of confirmed speakers like Dr. Ray Wynn Grant and Jen Morris from the Nature Conservancy. And we also, Dr. John King will be joining us as a keynote. And the last announcement I have is all about the Sea Change Fellowship. It's a brand new fellowship that NAAEE has. And we're talking all about civic engagement and EE today. This is a fellowship that addresses that specifically. And it is an 18-month fellowship full of training and mentoring and networking, funding opportunities, and we hope to bring together 40 amazing fellows from all over. You can learn more on our website, and applications are due June 30th. And that is my last announcement. We're going to go back to Q&A.
Yes, so we can stop sharing, go to Q&A, and thanks to everyone who is staying. A couple of the questions I have to all of you, and I know you answered a number of them in the chat. One of the questions was, is there any research that shows that if you get young people engaged in civic engagement early, that it translates into civic engagement later in life? Always a favorite question.
That calls for a good lit review, Judy, which I haven't seen recently, but there was a project done some years ago, and I could dig up that reference, which looked at a social studies high school class where one teacher happened to involve his students in their community master plan, their county master plan process over the entire year, doing the research, presenting in public, and so forth. Other students happened to get other social studies teachers who taught conventionally. It tracked them down like decades later and found that the students who happened to get that social studies teacher were much more likely to be involved in local civic organizations, to be officers in local civic organizations. And yeah, we need more studies like that.
Yeah.
But,
Thanks, Louise. And yes, it's always good to know. It just was so inspiring to watch what these young people had done. Another question was, what were the biggest challenges working with such a mix of audiences, and trying to understand how we can work better, because JEDI is so important to us, the justice, social justice piece, and really making environmental ed inclusive. What were some of your biggest challenges, all three of you?
I'll let Mara and Tori handle that. They were giving the examples.
I think one of the challenges that I've seen is just sort of the overwhelm that I mentioned at the beginning of my talk of getting started in something like this, and schools and communities that are very under-resourced. It just, there isn't a lot of administrative support, and that can be true at all schools, but I think that's where starting really small with baby steps is really important. And, just having one student come out and help the teachers made them realize there's a real asset here in the university that we could be drawing on, and, that we could build this together. And so I think that's one of the challenges. And the other one that I would say is more reflected in my own university students that I work with is that they haven't had good models of this in their own education. And so when I'm bringing them into this framework, I have to do more work with my students than necessarily you do with the younger kids, because the fourth graders or the middle school students just jump right in, but the university students have been taught and modeled things that we're trying to shift. And so that's a very big challenge in my mind. But once they start engaging in this way, where they don't have to have the answers and they're not conveying information, but involving and participating as a collaborative effort, they really see the transformative potential. So to answer that sort of more longitudinal question, I also think what I see from my students is once they get involved in this, it really is sort of almost, they get hooked. And I see many more students want to take this kind of practice forward in their work and doing kinds of civic engagement that they didn't enter university thinking they wanted to do. So I'm answering both questions, I guess, with that.
Great response.
And Kiani was a great example of what you were just saying, Tori.
Yeah. And Mara, anything you'd like to add?
Sure. Basically, one of the challenges we had when we were first starting Growing Up Bolder was, how do we make sure we're reaching underrepresented young people if we are doing voluntary after-school programs? Because what we're finding is, and you might find this when you look at a youth council, it often attracts the kids who are rising to the top because they've had a lot of support, or it's the same kids every time. We wanted to reach the kids who weren't being reached. So that's why our partnerships with existing organizations are so key. And really finding an organization like, for instance, I Have a Dream Foundation that we work with, who is aligned with the mission. And then we just build that relationship and keep building upon it.
Great. And Anne, I think we have one more question, and then we will close this wonderful session.
We do have a question that just came in from Katie. If you all could share any more about or examples of the collaborative decision-making process you used when working with students, and how do you balance that model with giving students that power versus any external parameters or structure you're working with?
I can just quickly say it's always a tension that you have to be aware of from the beginning. So we provide a structure, but we give a lot of choice within that structure so that the young people are really getting to choose what they're passionate about and research what matters to them. But we also want it within the structure of reality of like how their ideas will be used. So, if we're creating an outdoor learning space at the library, then that is the parameter, but they have a lot of flexibility within that.
Well,
I would add I would just add that in a number of, Louise mentioned in the chat, in the placemaking book, we discussed this, and in a number of other publications that feature Growing Up Bolder's work in particular, we talk about, a lot of people are afraid that young people will disengage if they don't get what they want, but that when we treat them as real partners, and when we talk about why this is or isn't possible, that just doesn't hold. And so when they are taken seriously, they tend to give better and more detailed, realistic recommendations and desires, and we move away from wanting roller coasters and things like that are outside the so I think part of it is setting that framework that's really well described in the chapter 3 that I mentioned, and that Growing Up Bolder does really well.
Well, thank you all so much. So inspirational. And everybody will get a copy of all of this but we can't thank you enough. And we look forward to hearing more and following up with all the resources. Thanks to everyone. Rachel, Ann, thank you. And thanks to all of you who stayed on. We really, really love this. Take care, everybody.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Rebecca.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Bye.